Sure.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today I will be talking about modern diplomacy. It is as topical as it is challenging. We are living through a period of rapid transition in international relations and impressive developments and achievements in the field of communication technology. There are new concepts and definitions that have evolved over the years of what we mean and understand when we refer to threats to peace and when we speak of security. Today, peacekeeping, peacemaking, and the building and maintenance of security form part of a wider diplomatic and political exercise. Preventive diplomacy involves new methods of approach as well as the adoption of innovative strategies to achieve the ultimate objective of peace. The concept of peace itself has also changed over the years to mean much more than just the traditional notion of absence of war. More diplomatic activity is carried out today in the international forum than on a bilateral basis. More dispute-resolving mechanisms are being created and more regional organizations are providing opportunities for further cooperation. The implication of these scientific and political developments for both the substance and the style of diplomacy are far-reaching. Considering the inevitable changes which have already occurred in the immediate post-Cold War period, one may indeed wonder what could be the main features of diplomacy as the next century unfolds. Over the last decade, diplomats from many more countries have been involved in such tasks as seeking a resolution to regional conflicts, delivering humanitarian assistance, dealing with global environmental problems, and promoting international economic cooperation. Diplomats are now involved in these types of activities to a much greater extent and with much greater relevance than was the case during the previous 4 decades. Diplomacy and diplomats have become part of the day-to-day life not only of people involved in international relations but also the general public. Diplomats are seen not only in conference rooms but also in the field, exercising what Kenyan diplomat has called gambit diplomacy. In such situation, one would expect a greater universal appreciation for diplomats and for the role of diplomacy in solving the problems of the modern world. Ironically, this is not necessarily the case. There is another side to the coin of excessive media exposure. Diplomacy is continuously under the scrutiny and criticism of the public. Looking at international development with a jaundiced eyes, some have even come to the conclusion that diplomacy is even futile or unnecessary. Some argue that in today's world, diplomats are gradually becoming superfluous or redundant. On the other hand, far greater importance is being assigned nowadays to diplomacy in resolving the problems of the modern world, in contrast to the alternative of military power. Admittedly, this is a new type of diplomacy. Diplomacy as an institution and the profession of the consummate diplomat. In modern times and even more so over the last decade or two, have gone well beyond the original early Greek conception of the go-between acting on behalf of governments as representative of the city-states. Diplomacy is faced by many challenges. Is this a completely new phenomenon? Has diplomacy been challenged in the past? Canadian author Dr. Gordon Smith recently cited the following challenges for diplomacy. First, the growing community of interest among nations. Second, the dramatic impact of public opinion on diplomacy. Third, the communications revolution. At first glance, these challenges look familiar and contemporary. In reality, they are quoted from an article which was first published in 1910. As we can see, diplomacy has survived in spite of all these challenges, constantly adapting to the challenges in its environment. Instead of typewriters, we have computers. Instead of cable, we have digital communications. Multilateral diplomacy today complements and in certain aspects even supersedes traditional bilateral diplomacy. The origin of diplomacy can be traced back to the moment when our predecessors realized that it was better to hear a message than to eat the messenger. Then, it can safely be assured as long as humanity exists. Diplomacy will survive. Undoubtedly, it will be practiced differently. It has to. Changes are already taking place. New concepts have evolved and will continue to evolve. We speak today of economic diplomacy, of environmental diplomacy, of preventive diplomacy, of multi-track diplomacy. The coining of new phrases constantly enriches the vocabulary of this profession, reflecting new trends in tools used by nations and their perennial quest for stability and peace around the globe.